Hello everyone, welcome back to the next video. So Cocoapods has just published a blog post. It mentions that it is coming to end of life soon. So let's go through it. So Cocoapods trunk read only plan. TLDR, in 2 years we plan to turn Cocoapods trunk to be read only. At that point, no new versions or pods will be added to trunk. Last month I wrote about how Cocoapods is currently being maintained. I also noted that we were discussing converting the main Cocopod spec report trunk to be read only. We are discussing that on a very long multi-year basis, we can drastically simplify the security of Cocopod trunk by converting the specs report to be read only. Infrastructure like the specs repo and the CDN would still operate as long as GitHub and JS Deliver continue to exist, which is pretty likely to be very long time. This will keep all existing builds working. I plan to implement the read-only mode so that when someone submits a new pod spec to Cocoapods, it always be denied at the server level. I would then convert the Cocopod specs report to be marked as archived on GitHub, which should cover all our bases. Making the switch will not break builds for people using Cocoapods in 2026 onwards. But at that point, you are not getting any more updates to dependencies which come through Cocoapods trunk. This shouldn't affect people who use Cocoapods with their own specs repos or have all of their dependencies vended. Example, they all come from npm. Timeline: my goal is to send 2 year hard to miss notification en masse and then do a test run a month before the final shutdown. January 2025, I will email all email addresses for people who have contributed a pod spec, informing them of the impending switch to read only and linking them to this blog post. September October 2026, I will again email all email addresses for people who have contributed a pod spec, informing them of all the impending switch to read only and linking them to this blog post, noting that they have roughly a month before we do a test run of going read only. November 1 to 7th 2026, I will trigger a test run giving automation a chance to break early. December 2nd 2026, I will switch trunk to not accept new pod specs permanently. This is a Wednesday after American Thanksgiving, so I think folks won't be in rush mode. Contact, these dates are not set in stone and maybe someone out there has a good reason for us to amend the timeline. I don't think I'm amenable to moving it forwards, but within reason there's space for backwards. If you have questions, you can contact the team via info@cocoapods.org, me personally at cocoapods.orta.io, or reach out to me via Blue Sky. Cocoapods support and maintenance plan, we are still keeping it ticking, but we are being more upfront that Cocoapods is in maintenance mode. Cocoapods is about 13 years old now, and the landscape for iOS development has changed a lot in that time. I remember the fragmented islets of small shared libraries like ASI HTTP request, 320, SBJSON, SS Toolkit, iCarousel, with tricky upgrade instructions and complicated build setups. Cocopod simplified the process enough that it turned into the de facto way to share code in the iOS and Mac community. In 2015, Apple announced that Cocopod's project has been Sherlocked because they were going to create their own package manager, Swift package manager. This move effectively took all the wind out of the sails of Cocopod, slowing active development of the project, as competing with Apple on their own turf is rarely a battle worth your volunteer hours. Since Swift package manager announcement 9 years ago, members of the core team have individually had reasons for continual maintenance, a sense of duty, been employed to work on libraries or apps which uses Cocoapods, working on a build infra for large projects where Cocoapods is key part of the build process, or just a love of the community. However, with time, these links become more tedious too. Jobs change, people move to new ecosystem, and we have been slowly been moving Cocoapods to a place where work only happens when something external causes it. That could be security issues, like I have reported the last few years on the blog, on Xcode or Xcode breaking changes which requires us to tweak some settings and make a new build. If Cocopod's only audience were native Coco developers, Cocopod's usage should be on the decline. However, that is not the case. The popularity of React Native and Flutter have ensured that most metrics of usage slash traffic has been steadily rising over time. This puts Cocoapods in a strange place. A lot of the maintainers don't use it. Apple have been maintaining a replacement for 9 years, and the new users of the project barely even know that Cocopod exists or what it does. So we concluded we need to figure out what is going on with the project and how we have been treating it as maintenance over the last few years. How Cocoapods is maintained. Strictly speaking, we don't plan on changing how we are maintaining Cocoapods. We are just going to start being clear how Cocoapods has been maintained. We will make sure to handle systemic security issues to trunk. We will aim to make at least 2 releases a year to keep up to date with Xcode updates. We will aim to look at support requests for trunk every 6 months. We will keep the website infrastructure from not falling over completely. We are open to PRs, which makes CocoaPods more future friendly. What we will not be doing, we don't actively follow GitHub issues as support avenues for individuals. We aren't planning on active CocoaPods development in terms of new features. We aren't going to make guarantees about handling PRs from people adding new features or application level bugs. New contributors, this is where people would normally say if we had more volunteers or money, etc., but we are not sure that this would help. The scale of maintaining build tooling in Ruby have grown increasingly less relevant over the years, to the point that the overlap between knows how to handle an Xcode project and knows what's going on in a complex Ruby project is pretty slim. We have opened the idea that multiple people who are well motivated to do the necessary volunteer work may be out there, but the search, training, and mentoring is also a big ask for existing folks who have little enough time for the project. Long term plan, read only specs. We are discussing that on a very long multi year basis. We can drastically simplify the security of CocoaPod Strung by converting the specs repo to be read only. Infrastructure like the specs repo and the CDN would still operate as long as GitHub and JS Deliver continue to exist, which is pretty likely to be a very long time. This will keep all existing builds working. At least for projects like React Native, this could be fine as is, as most of the libraries come via npm instead of the trunk. I can't talk to how Flutter ecosystem works as I have no exposure to it. We would make the specs repo read only by offering a date when trunk, our Cocopod specs repo authentication server, will be disabled. As trunk is the main target in a supply chain attack, this would nix all the key issues there. I think we would be open to changing if there is any popular alternative plan for the specs repo was maintained and used by a reasonable number of the community. we w- would also we would have a specific blog with the comprehensive plan if when this idea settles with us. And to be very explicit, the announced date would be years away. I use Cocoapods as a hidden abstraction in my framework. Example, I maintain Unity, React Native, Flutter, etc. A lot of this project will and should be migrating to Swift Package Manager with time. As specified above, we are not breaking anything, but bugs you may raise are unlikely to be get fixed. If you run these sorts of frameworks and are commercially exposed here, then we are open to chatting. I think no one on the current team is interested in working on this full time, but that doesn't mean we can't find ways to have others who consider this as a part of their job role, taking over parts of what Cocoapods taking. You can mail us at info@cocoapods.org or me personally at cocoapods.orta.io if you prefer. Plodding on long-term maintenance of public infra is often a long grind with the occasional thanks, so I want to try to leave this on a thanks and give a shout out to all the folks who have been helping to keep this project alive. Then Cocopod Trunk 3 Remote Code Execution Foundation 2023. Over the last month, security researchers at evasec.io have been reached out to us about 3 separate vulnerabilities in Cocopod Trunk, the server which handles updates to pods. We have been working with evasec to patch these issues as they come up. Looking at all three combined, I feel we needed to reset all user session again, which is why I'm writing on the blog post instead of working on Pusmo, which just shipped this week. There are 3 key issues reported against Trunk, which were promptly fixed. It was still possible to use the claim your pod process to take over a pod when someone had removed all prior maintainers from it. The email which is sent out to verify your email address can be tricked to change to link to a third party. The part of trunk which verifies your email address could be used to execute shell commands on the trunk server. Being able to execute arbitrary shell commands on the server gave a possible attacker the ability to read our environment variable, which could be used to write Cocoapods specs repo and read the trunk database. being able to trick people into clicking on a link which would take them to a third party site could be used to steal their session keys. I can't guarantee neither of this happened, and I would rather be on the safe side. This means you will need to log in again to trunk to deploy any new pod spec. If you have automated deployment to Cocoapods working with a stored environment variable right now, this will break and you will need to pod trunk register again and replace your Cocoapods trunk token. We are sorry, I know that sucks, but it also guarantees that you are the only person with right access to your pods. If you are not a pod author, you do not need to do anything. Evasec.io are still in the process of writing up full technical details of how exploits work. So I will update this post with links with the write-ups when they are ready, as well as do a blog post with the details of higher level to describe how they work to folks who are not intimidated with server architecture. So if you want, you can read on about this as well. So yeah, that's it. I think Cocopod, it's time to move to Swift Package Manager. I think native iOS projects have already moved to it. I think even for Flutter, you can use Swift Package Manager. Mm, I think React Native still uses Cocoapods, but I think in time it will also move to Swift Package Manager, hopefully. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.